he looks, he sees, he thinks. That sequence, how can we incorporate it in our edits? Hello and welcome to Cut Reveal, the show where we talk about filmmaking, editing, and things that are interesting to editors. I'm kind of borrowing that intro from script notes. I don't know, I just found out. But it wasn't intentional, okay? So I hope that
It's an homage.
they will forgive us. Anyway, so today's episode is actually kind of a request from one of the listeners, Jerome. Cheers to you. Who said that it would be good if we discussed some foundation principles to editing as well. So something like Kuleshov Effect. That's how most people call it. So Ricky, hey, welcome.
Oh, hi. Great to be here. Erwan again is on vacation, so he will not be joining us. So in a couple months, he'll be back, maybe. Europeans love to go on vacation. Nothing wrong with that, but anyway.
No, good for him. So Ricky, can you talk about who Kuleshov was?
Yeah, so Lev Kuleshov was a Russian filmmaker and early film theorist who started his career in 1916, which obviously predates a lot of silent films. This was in Russia, for sure. He was born in 1899, so he started his film career at 17. This was before people were even doing film stuff, so it's kind of incredible to hear about it. But as an art student, he was really drawn to film and its potential to express social commentary. Fast forward, he basically became a director and was doing a bunch of stuff with editing, and he ended up becoming a film teacher and whatever. So he created this experiment, or they call it the Kuleshov Experiment, also known as the Khuleshov Effect, as we know it, but it was a demonstration of how important it is and how if you take a sequence of images rather than a single shot, the audience will basically infer what a person is feeling based off of the image. So with this, in the Kuleshov effect, we have an image of a man with a neutral expression on his face, which is essentially a guy just like staring. The next image that we see within this effect is the first. So there's three examples within the Kuleshov effect of the demonstration. We have a sequence of three images: the man with a neutral face, then a plate of soup, and then the man's face again. And so then we infer as the audience that this guy is hungry, even though the two images of the man's face are the exact same. There's no emotion in either of them, but we just infer, okay, this guy's got to be hungry. The other two examples are we see a dead girl in a coffin, and then we basically think, okay, this man is sad because it's clearly he's grieving over this woman or this girl. And then the third one is a woman laying on a sofa. And then we basically think, oh, so this is a lust. He's lusting after this woman. So despite there being no real emotion in the guy's face for any of these sequences, the audience, after having seen it, will have thought, oh, they will ascribe emotions to this person. So that's basically the effect. It's kind of a reaction.
Yeah, Alfred Hitchcock did a similar demonstration, but in his example, the second shot of himself, because he was demonstrating it on himself, was with a smile. So the audience is interpreting the smile based on the shot in between. So we've got him just looking at something, an image of what was it in his demonstration? A child playing, for example, right?
Yeah, a woman and a child, and then a woman in a bikini.
And based on what was in between those, right, you kind of get the sense of what his smile means, even though it's the same smile in all of three examples, right?
Right. And then Hitchcock called this pure cinema. This was his example, pure cinema. So what we're seeing now is that the Kuleshov effect in itself, at the very core, is something that people have used within their own careers to basically as a starting point, so to speak. With Hitchcock, as in pure cinema, we've got the sequence of images, but the third image is of the person reacting to what they're seeing. And that's kind of what we see now in most of film.
Yeah. And it's worth noting, by the way, that it's not like they started doing it after demonstration, right? That Kuleshov did. Editors were doing it for a long time before. It's just that he was first to, I guess, systemize it in a way, just run a bit of demonstration. I think I'm not sure, but I think he did it with a test audience or something like that.
Yeah, correct.
To really make a point and to get because they were actually thinking that the second shot is different. That's the thing. They were thinking, people were thinking that the second shot of himself, of this actor actually, was different, right? So yeah, that's funny. But yeah, the editors were doing it for a long time, and actually Sven Pape, aka this guy edits, he did a video with Dr. Karen Perlman about this, and she makes a point of how, in her view, it should be called the editor's effect, because it was like so common and all editors were doing it. And in the early days, especially, those were mostly women, like mostly, just with the invasion of sound in editing, kind of like, doing both in the edit. That's where really a lot of men came into that world. But earlier on, it was seen as something similar to sewing, I guess, like a manual labor.
Yeah, which is wild. So wild to think about.
Yeah, but like, it also makes sense to some extent, because like in early days, you weren't doing coverage, like you didn't have coverage. You very often, you just really followed the script, and you didn't have many takes and so on, right? But it was evolving, I guess, right? And with that evolution, like, those women starting experimenting and doing this Kuleshov effect. And
Yeah, so to expound upon that, like the Kuleshov effect was the reason why it's so well known is because he was the first to basically create like a teacher example of it, rather than like it being he's the one that invented this. Well, he was just proving the fact that if you put a bunch of sequence of images together, it's going to cause the audience to emote in a certain way. So the manipulation of the audience's emotions. But the thing is that this was also in Soviet Russia, so this was new at that point when he was doing it. So if anything, we gotta keep in mind that this was the start of, or at least the Kuleshov effect was the basis of the Soviet montage cinema
Mhm.
movement within Russia and stuff. So even though it was happening outside of the Soviet Union, this is why it's kind of so interesting, or not so interesting, but so important, that those aren't the right words either, but that's why it took effect, because it was such a big part of Russian cinema.
Yeah, and you can see it like in Battleship Potemkin, for example, one of Eisenstein's movies. Like, Kuleshov effect is used over and over, like all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to mention, because like there is a variation of Kuleshov effect, this demonstration that someone did. I don't remember who and when, but they did it with music as well, right? Where it's like, you just have like a shot, you're not even juxtaposing it with anything else, but the music that plays underneath, the audience also like perceives the scene differently based just on the music. So like, you change the music, and the whole tone and the whole message, so to speak, of the sequence changes based on the music.
Filmmaking, it's wild, man.
Yeah, exactly. And like, we use it all the time. Like, everyone uses it. Like, we all do it. Like, that's the foundation of editing, and that's what makes it a unique in a way, but also a lively art form, I guess.
Oh, for sure. This is what separates it from any other art form.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the juxtaposition, or the mixing of all types of media, like you said, audio, visual. Those, well, two things, I guess, two things. But regardless, so you're saying like the emotion of it. So moving pictures making look like they're are actually just a single picture moving really, really fast. So it's all putting it together. Let's get into some examples of of the Kuleshov effect, or as we know it in these days. So we'll start with Peter, because I think that the one that you have found is probably the most pure form of Kuleshov effect compared to what we see now in more films, or what is kind of big examples. Or
I'm not sure if I would call it this way, but it's definitely like evolution of it. I think it's evolution of pure Kuleshov effect. That's what I would say. So, if the one I'm referencing to is I think the second episode of Tiger King. And we get to know, throughout the two episodes, we get to know this woman, Carol Baskin, right? And early on, like, we're like, okay, so she's the antagonist to Tiger King, and she's kind of probably like, just protecting the tigers, and she seems to be a good person, right? But then throughout the second episode, we got a lot of information that that actually shows that it might not be the case, and potentially she's as dangerous, if not even more, than Tiger King himself. And the way they end this episode is so brilliant. I love the ending of this episode because we get like voiceover or of summarizing something of summarizing like things that she might have done in the past, and like the extent of her dangerous intentions and so on, right? And you get like a really a shot where she's not expressing any emotion. She's just looking into the lens and she's kind of breaking the fourth wall. And based on all of the stuff that they just juxtaposed with that image, she looks like Joker. She's like a pure devil in that scene, like in that shot, like a pure devil. And you're like questioning yourself, like, wow, like, is that woman really that bad as he's saying? Like, and it won't be clear throughout the series, like what she did, what she didn't do really for real. But like, I think that like creates this beautiful expression in the audience where where we are asking ourselves, like, who is she?
Hmm.
So that's the one from me. I really like this one.
Yeah, I think that's really like when I say pure example of the Kuleshov effect, I'm saying that in the basis of what the example of the Kuleshov effect is. Well, we're seeing like this person who doesn't have any expression, and then it's juxtaposed with some other thing, and then okay, we're attributing those what we're feeling to that person. So, like you said with the Tiger King, then it's like all this crazy shit, and it's like, oh, we're watching this woman who is basically stone faced, who basically is a sociopath just based off of the stuff that we're hearing about that. Okay, this we're drawing these conclusions to that. The example that I came up with or that I found was from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, which is my favorite Harry Potter movie, by the way, in case you wanted to know.
I wanted to know. Good, thank you.
So, spoiler alert, Dumbledore dies at the end of this movie. This movie's been out for a long time, so it's your own fault if you didn't know that. But there's a scene basically at the end of the film which leads up to Dumbledore's death, and Draco Malfoy, which is Harry Potter's basically nemesis, he has repaired what they call a vanishing cabinet, which enables basically somebody from another place in the country to come to where he's at. So there's two of them. Anyway, and so within this scene, he has fixed the cabinet, and now is kind of the time when his merry band of bad guys are going to come into the castle. And so what we have is we have a scene of Draco Malfoy kind of standing there looking kind of panicked and whatever, and then it cuts to a scene of the close-up scene of the handle opening, and then it cuts back to him, and it's a sequence of essentially 6 images or shots, being 3 of them being Draco, and then the other 3 being basically like the progression of like the door opening. We're seeing the door handle open, and then it open, and then they all come out and stuff. And then within those 3 shots, he gets more and more agitated until he actually runs out of the frame. As we think of like the Kuleshov effect, it's basically like a reaction shot. Like even as we saw with, even more so, like it's a pure cinema. So that's what was Hitchcock's explanation of when he adapted the Kuleshov effect, or the editor's effect, as we'll call it, to his own filmmaking style. And so that's kind of what we're seeing, is that we see the person, we see an image, and then we see the person's reaction, and then we can defer. Okay, then we can see that he's reacting, but then it's on us how we kind of interpret that. To that extent, then within this scene, we know that even though Draco has done something that's kind of unforgivable, we can see that he is having second thoughts about what he's done. And so there's no triumph in it, but it's like the reaction of, okay, now we feel a little bit of pity for this character. Up until like this is the 6th movie we've basically hated. We're like, this is the first film where we see Draco Malfoy essentially be kind of not the shitty kid, where we see like his character is a lot more in depth. So that was the example that I thought was really good of like describing that kind of Kuleshov effect.
Another example I wanted to mention is Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock's movie, because I've seen it just recently, like 2 weeks ago. And it's a lot of like,
Can you tell them what it's about?
Yeah, basically a guy, like, he has a broken leg, has to spend time at his flat and at his home, and he's looking out of the window and he's observing his neighbors, basically, right? And he's seeing something suspicious or whatever, right? And we get a lot of shots of just him looking out of the window, and then intercut it with like a shot on a long lens of one of the windows of his neighbors, right, and what they're doing, right. And we usually the reactions that we get aren't emotionless. There usually is like emotion, his reaction to it, but still, like, it's I'm sure that, like, if you would put something different in between, those reactions would be read differently, right? So that's always the sequence in Kuleshov Effect, is that, like, a person looks, a person sees, a person thinks, right? That's like the famous sequence that we as the audience like read those shots as, right? We see him in the first shot, then we're just like, okay, he's looking at something. Then we see what he's looking at, and then we create the meaning of his thoughts in that third shot, in that reaction shot that we get. So that's the essence of it. And in Rear Window, there is really a lot of those shots, a lot of those like intercutting between, like a lot of those juxtapositions that we create the meaning from. So that's why I think this is like a great movie when it comes to like studying Kuleshov Effect.
Hitchcock, all of his films have this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he's kind of known for. Another famous example would be Psycho and then North by Northwest. A lot of his stuff, well, even within the Kuleshov Effect, but specifically with Hitchcock and pure cinema, like it's a person, we're seeing them, and we're seeing their point of view, and then they're reacting. So we've kind of had all these examples. We're kind of beating a dead horse, but it's innumerable how many there are. Like Spielberg is also a big proponent of it. He has it adapted in his own filmmaking style, which is his is a lot of like we see the reaction of the people, and then we see what they're looking at. Specifically, like in there's a lot of those shots in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. If you haven't seen it, it's this movie about aliens. They come and whatever. In the end, everybody is seeing the spaceship come down, and it's just like a lot of reaction shots of like, oh shit, a lot of oh shit shots, like the oh faces of like, oh what's happening, and then we're seeing their faces before we see what they're actually looking at and whatever. In regards to Seven is a film that I love. David Fincher. It's got Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. But basically, it's the famous "What's in the box" scene. So at the very end, I don't know. This is going to be a spoiler alert. I'll just say that there's a head in a box. We don't know it until basically we've got Brad Pitt with the bad guy, and then Morgan Freeman is probably like 100 yards away looking at this box that's been mysteriously delivered into the middle of nowhere, which is like where they're at right now. Open the box. It ends up being the wife of Brad Pitt's
What's in the
head.
box?
What's in the box? What's in the box? And so the sequence is once that happens, then we have kind of the explanation of the bad guy telling to Brad Pitt what he's done, and then Morgan Freeman trying to get the gun out of his hand so he doesn't kill him because he's a cop, and a cop killing a suspect is bad. But we're cutting back and forth between the reactions of Morgan Freeman and the box, and then also back to Brad Pitt and what he sees, and he's looking at Morgan Freeman. So it's like very complicated Kuleshov effect in regards to like, okay, we're seeing everybody.
I think we also get like quite neutral shots of Kevin Spacey in that sequence.
Yeah, he's kind of just like the explaining more so of like what's happened, but yeah, he's chilled out, and it's very very awesome. I mean, it's a great film anyway, but that sequence is kind of a masterclass of like editing and really manipulating the audience and like, oh, the tension of that scene and whatever. But
yes, I still remember how impactful it was on me. Even though I've seen Seven like, I don't know, 15 years ago, but it still feels fresh in my mind.
popular culture is not going to let you forget what's in the box.
But I guess the thing that I want to end with is that knowing about this, it's good to think consciously about incorporating this stuff into things we do. Because like that's what we learn this stuff for, right? To be inspired and to get actually, to actually use it, right? And like, okay, of course, like we're using it all the time, like a variation of it. But I think the pure cinema approach of the one of Alfred Hitchcock is something that we could strive for. And like, I recently talked about this with Jim Cummings, that like cinema is so rare. It's cinema these days. Like even though we have all of these possibilities, very often we don't use those. Like, how many match cuts do you see in movies? Like, not that many, for example, right? But those are those like pure cinema things that we really appreciate with as the as audience, right? So, like, when you're working on your next edit or your next film, like, think about this. How do I incorporate like pure cinema approach of like shot one, shot two, and reaction shot? Like, so he looks, he sees, he thinks. That sequence. How can we incorporate it in our edits? I guess. So that's what we want to leave you with.
Yeah. So, and if you have any questions about it, or if you want to tell us to fuck off because we're talking crazy talk, you can reach out to us at podcast@cuttothepoint.com. As always, speakpipe.com/CTR, the Instagram Cut to Reveal, which is at Cut to Reveal, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Cut to Reveal. And then if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. So, we always like to hear from you guys and girls. Also, whatever platform you listen to us on, please leave us a review and also leave comments for us. We love to find comments and read them and find out about
Do it.
Yeah, do it. So that's the Kuleshov Effect. We hope that you have a great week and weekend. And
what's in the box?
what's in the box?